Welcome to Blaze News, the mandate, day 34. I'm Jill Savage. Tonight on the agenda, Secretary of State Marco Rubio announces a major breakthrough in the war in Ukraine in the peace negotiations. Speaking from Saudi Arabia, Rubio said that the Ukrainians have accepted the term of a proposed ceasefire. Watch.
Today, we made an offer that the Ukrainians have accepted, which is to enter into a ceasefire and into immediate negotiations to end this conflict in a way that's enduring and sustainable and accounts for their interests, their security, their ability to prosper as a nation.
Now Rubio says the ball is in the Russians' court. President Trump has confirmed that his team will meet with a Russian delegation to end the war, potentially even tomorrow. The First Circuit Court of Appeals denied the Trump administration's motion for a stay for its executive order on birthright citizenship. The DOJ did not argue about the merits of the executive order and based its argument on the state's plaintiffs' lack of standing. However, Chief Judge David Barron concluded that the government has failed to make a strong showing that the plaintiff states likely lack Article 3 standing. It's official. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt announced the swearing in of Sean Curran as the Director of Secret Service. Take a look.
And last night, President Trump also held an official swearing-in ceremony in the Oval Office for Sean Curran, who is now the 28th Director of the United States Secret Service. Sean demonstrated unbelievable bravery under gunfire in Butler, Pennsylvania this past July when an assassin tried to kill President Trump.
Levin also responded to the criticisms of the American economy under Trump. She made sure to clarify that the Trump administration is hard at work cleaning up the disaster left by the Biden White House. Listen.
The delinquency rate on credit card loans increased 63% under Joe Biden, hitting a near 12-year high. Under Joe Biden, all net job growth went to foreign-born Americans. Real wages declined by 1.5% under Joe Biden. And as we all know, and this administration continues to combat, prices soared more than 20% under Joe Biden because of his reckless spending and economic policies.
Well, speaking of truces, we have a ceasefire in the trade war. Ontario Premier Doug Ford threatened to implement a 25% surcharge to the electricity sold to the United States. Watch this.
Let me be clear. I will not hesitate to increase this charge. If necessary, if the United States escalates, I will not hesitate to shut the electricity off completely.
But that didn't last long because in response, Trump threatened a new series of tariffs. After a phone call with Premier, Trump announced hostilities between the United States and Ontario have cooled for now.
Already Canada, and I respect very much. As you know, there's a very strong man in Canada who said he was going to charge a surcharge or a tariff on electricity coming into our country. He has called and he said he's not going to do that. Okay, he's not going to do that. And it would have been a very bad thing if he did. And he's not going to do that, so I respect that. But we were just informed that he's not going to do that.
Kash Patel wasted no time in fortifying the relationship between the FBI and the Trump administration. One of his first requests was about how to securely contact the Oval Office. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt assured Americans that Attorney General Pam Bondi and the Justice Department will operate separately from the White House. The Department of Defense said that DOGE has identified $80 million in wasteful spending. Earlier today, the GOP Oversight Committee held a hearing on preventing improper payments and fraud. Representative Brandon Gill grilled witness Kristen Kokolek on the issue of fraudulent checks. Watch.
Have you ever seen an agency head get fired, for instance, for mailing out billions of dollars in fraudulent checks?
I have not seen that.
Got it. Okay.
Sometimes it's just that simple. The Trump administration has launched a war on rising egg prices, and it's working. Agricultural Secretary Brooke Rollins announced the cost of eggs has gone down about $2 since the plan was implemented 2 weeks ago. Watch.
We're more focused on how we bring the price of eggs down in the avian bird flu for everyone. A good piece of news we just got in the last day or two is that the average cost of a dozen eggs has now gone down $1.85 since we announced our plan about a week and a half ago on February the 26th.
However, she did warn that they'll likely increase again over Easter. Now let's go ahead and bring in Blaze News editor-in-chief Matthew Peterson. Brooke Rollins, a good friend of yours. But the news of the day has to be Ukraine and the potential peace deal that's there on the table right now.
So Ukraine started out in the early, like 10 plus years ago. Ukraine starts out as the giant whale carcass floating in the ocean of the world that all the corrupt sharks, all the corrupt Western nations of the world are feasting on. Money laundering, all kinds of schemes. This was going on for years in Ukraine. But recently, since the war began, it became something much, much worse. And that is a meat grinder where the United States of America and the West were willing to throw Ukrainian bodies into the grinder of the Russian army up against Russia's aggression, and without being willing the entire time to fully back that up. This is why in the beginning, some of us said this is a bad idea. Of course, someone needs to, they should counteract Russia, but the tough talk and the unwillingness to find peace terms was ridiculous when it became clear that Ukraine couldn't win the war. Today is indeed a historic day because the Trump administration has returned common sense back to Ukraine and gives that country a chance to rebuild and become strong again. And it really ends a very sad chapter of the last, two decades of the wars and corruption in Ukraine.
I look at Ukraine, I look at the border, and so many other issues. All you needed was leadership on this. This didn't have to take this long, but there was a complete lack of leadership in the Oval Office.
Yes. When you think about not just a lack of leadership, right, there's a lack of mind. I mean, there's nothing there. I mean, who was running the show? Actually, Jill, we don't even know if there was a lack of leadership because there were people leading. It's just no one knows who they were, right? Signing the documents with the auto sign, we don't even know. So maybe they were leading just in a way we don't understand. But exactly, what you see is political will, the will to do the job, wins the day. He comes in and says, we're gonna have peace. This is ridiculous. He made his opinion clear. Trump doesn't hide anything from you. And then he went out and they did it. I mean, they had a great team, right? Rubio, all these others, Vance is in there. I mean, Rubio's an incredible Secretary of State, and they brought peace to the world. I want to see the left, rant and rave for war, but it goes to the immigration problem as well. There was no problem. The problem was that we allowed it to happen, and we pushed Ukraine. We pushed people into the line of fire, literally bodies into the line of fire, so that we could say that we were going to be big, tough, against the Russians without ever willing to put our own troops on the ground.
We'll talk about other members of the Trump team. Josh Hammer will explain the latest developments at the DOJ and FBI next. It's time to talk about Good Ranchers because since 2017, over 140,000 family farms have shut down in the United States. And why? Because all the meat in the grocery store now, it's not coming from American farms anymore. It's imported from overseas, and all they care about is mass production and low cost. That is taking priority now over quality. And this spring, we need to change that. It's time to spring into action and put American farms first because nothing beats American quality. And that's why I choose GoodRanchers.com, because they stand for integrity, tradition, 100% American raised meat every single time. All the products on GoodRanchers.com have trustworthy ingredients. You know that their meat is born, raised, and harvested right here in the United States, so you know exactly where it comes from. And there's no antibiotics, there's no hormones or seed oils. It's just one simple ingredient, and that's meat. Good Ranchers is delivered straight to your door, offering you that true farm-to-table transparency. So you're supporting American farms and ranchers, and you're getting the good meat that you can feel good about serving, and you can skip the grocery store. Right now, Good Ranchers is running their Spring into Action promotion. So when you subscribe to any of their boxes, you get to decide if you want some chicken nuggets, which don't have any seed oils in them, or if you want some free bacon, ground beef, or salmon, and you'll get that in your order for a year. Now, be sure to use my code Jill at checkout for $40 off your first order. It's the best deal that they've ever had. So spring into action and help American farmers with every purchase. Visit GoodRanchers.com right now. And remember, use code Jill to get free meat for a year and $40 off. Good Ranchers, American meat delivered. Well, big changes are happening at the FBI and DOJ under President Trump's second term. The headline from the Wall Street Journal says that Trump tightens his grip on the FBI and Justice Department. FBI Director Kash Patel has taken a direct line to the Oval Office, and we mentioned earlier on the show that Caroline Leavitt said that AG Pam Bondi and the Justice Department will operate separately still from the White House. So here to break all of this down for us is Senior Editor-at-Large for Newsweek, Josh Hammer. Josh, it's great to have you back on the show. So what's going on right now with Trump and Patel and Bondi? What does all of this mean?
Well, I think what it means is that Donald Trump ran on a platform of draining the swamp, and he's currently in the process of draining the swamp. I mean, there's this old quote from H.L. Mencken, the early 20th century social critic and newspaper columnist, who famously said, and I'm paraphrasing here, but it's a close paraphrase, he famously said that democracy is the theory that the people vote for what they want and they deserve to get it good and hard. Now, Mencken was actually criticizing democracy, but we'll hold that aside for now. The point is that you get what you want. I mean, that is kind of the whole point of having self-determination in a republic there. And Donald Trump campaigned very hard on draining the swamp. And it's not entirely clear to me, frankly, what people expected, what he would do when he came into power. I mean, did y'all think that MAGA drain the swamp was just going to be a bunch of mean tweets or posts on Truth Social? Was it going to just be kind of like a snicker or a snarl or kind of a stare down of a political opponent? No, it's going to actually have some real tangible changes there. So we've seen that obviously with Elon Musk at Doge. And when it comes to the FBI, which is kind of the deep state of the deep state, the FBI has been ground zero of everything that conservatives criticize when we say the deep state there. I mean, this is the origins, obviously, of Crossfire Hurricane, the nickname given to the Russia collusion delusion going all the way back to 2015, which Kash Patel, by the way, was one of the first national security investigators actually trying to uncover the rot of Crossfire Hurricane, an issue that he's been well on top of there. So the corporate media typically reports on this as power consolidation or it's going to be a purge there. You're actually just trying to get rid of gross rank malfeasance, the kind of subversive action which should not be in a presidential administration, which again is oriented towards draining the swamp. I mean, constitutionally speaking, this is all entirely emphatically clear. There is one person and one person only in America's constitutional structure who wields the executive power. That is the President of the United States. Article 2, Section 1, Clause 1. The executive power shall be vested in a president of the United States. It is not vested in the vice president. It is not vested in the attorney general, the FBI director, the dog catcher, the secretary, the coffee boy. No one. It's literally vested in one person, and that's the president of the United States. The left tries to fearmonger and say this is unitary executive theory, this term that kind of caught on during the Bush administration days. It's just basic textual common sense. So Donald Trump is the one who's calling the shots here, whether it comes to Elon Musk, whether it comes to Pam Bondi, Kash Patel. It's all downstream of him because he alone wields the executive power there. And to the extent that there are going to be firings in place pursuant to the executive power, good. That's the way it should be. It's not a so-called purge. That is just justice and our Constitution actually working as intended.
Okay, so it sounds like you see the headlines today about the FBI reporting directly to the president as something that's perfectly appropriate given the power of the president. President is in charge of everyone, and therefore it's fine if there's direct communication between the two, right? It sounds like you think that. If so, I mean, add something if you don't. Tell me if you disagree. But if so, let's move on to DOJ because we have to talk about, I won't say growing criticism, but I think there's some concern out there about Pam Bondi, and everyone should give all these people a break because it's been about 5 minutes since they've been in office, and there's a lot of things to do. So I'm skeptical of criticism of anyone because we haven't seen a lot. But certainly there is something to criticize in how the DOJ rolled out those Epstein files, quote unquote. And there are people who are worried that Bondi is, to use the parlance of our times, too normie, right? She's too moderate or squishy, to use the old words, and won't go far enough to root out corruption. What are your thoughts about this?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, but I feel like I actually was on this very show to talk about Pam Bondi back when Donald Trump actually announced that she was going to be his attorney general pick. And what I said then, I will just reiterate now, which is she was not my first choice. She was not, frankly, anywhere on my list. She's not who I would have personally recommended. she was kind of just yesterday's news. I mean, she was a two-term attorney general of the state of Florida, which is where I live. She has a generally good reputation here in Florida in our legal circles there. Back in the day, she was one of the leaders of the red state pushback against Obamacare, even on the same-sex marriage issue, a kind of quintessential so-called cultural issue back during the lead up to Obergefell. But I think the point is, these were kind of yesterday's issues, right? So, in this new MAGA 2.0 second Trump administration there, I personally would have counseled kind of a more forward-looking pick, not someone trying to kind of, bring back the great memories of yesteryear there. But to your point as well, Matt, it is very early. I also am kind of holding the round in the chamber, so to speak. I'm not really unloading on anyone yet there. The Epstein files thing clearly was botched. I mean, there's really just no way to kind of put lipstick on a pig on that one. I mean, someone clearly dropped the ball there. And frankly, I still don't know myself exactly what happened. I think a lot of people are still trying to figure out exactly what happened there. It could be as simple as the Trump campaign and administration slightly overpromised and then had no choice but to underdeliver there. Maybe there actually were just too many things that for various legal procedural reasons simply could not be redacted. I don't know. I genuinely just don't know exactly what is going on there. I'm hoping that we will learn more, especially including congressional investigations in the weeks and months ahead there. But not off to an amazing start there, but again, it's very, very early there. There is a very long way to go, and I'm generally at this stage, Matt, generally speaking, just giving grace, which is kind of unlike me, to be honest with you, but we're very early on.
We're going with it. Certainly, headlines out of today: the war in Ukraine and the Trump administration. I saw you on X earlier saying what a diplomatic achievement from the Trump administration. This is so different than what we saw over the last, 3 years, essentially, that the war has been going on, that when you look at what they've been able to do to come in just over 50 days now, to make the progress that they've made, just kind of going back to your original point of Donald Trump is going to get things done and he's going to do it with the people that he wants around him. What do you make of the latest news then with these headlines today?
Well, I think we're seeing potentially a Nobel Prize worthy achievement in the making. And we're, that's putting the cart way ahead of the horse here. I mean, we have this kind of preliminary agreement from Vladimir Zelensky. First of all, I mean, the mere fact that Zelensky felt compelled to go back to the negotiating table with Donald Trump, with Waltz, Rubio, with Kaufman, and the entire negotiating team there, it shows, I think, just how much he knows that he grievously erred. So I guess credit where credit is due. I mean, dude, you really dropped the ball extraordinarily hard. I mean, like the hardest of all hard in that White House meeting there a couple weeks ago. And I guess you finally learned from those mistakes there. So good for him. We'll see what happens now on the other end with Vladimir Putin. But this has been an extraordinarily bloody war. This war has been going on for over 3 years. Vladimir Putin marched into eastern Ukraine and Crimea in February of 2022, literally over 3 years ago now. The death toll in that conflict is hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people there. Between plummeting birth rates, a shattered economy, Ukrainians who have died in the front lines, who have fled overseas, who are not marrying, not having kids there. It's going to take this country at least a half century, maybe even more than that, to have any chance of recovering there. This has been one of my criticisms of Zelensky all along, by the way, is that he puts on this kind of tough guy approach. We will fight to recover every last square inch of territory there. And to me, I kind of say, from your own perspective, from a Ukrainian national interest perspective, at what cost? At what cost are you actually going to wage to recover every single square inch there? So look, Donald Trump campaigns hard on bringing peace to this part of the world there. And, no one really fully understands exactly how Donald Trump works when he is wheeling and dealing there. I mean, the Gaza plan, I mean, who the heck knows what's going on there, right? Yeah, I mean, he's kind of throwing a lot of darts, a lot of mud at the wall. He's throwing mud at the wall, seeing what sticks there. His methods are obviously unorthodox. That's very much a feature, not a bug, by the way. And it looks like it's working like a charm right now in Saudi Arabia in this Russia-Ukraine negotiation. But again, this is only the Zelensky part of the equation. The Putin part of the equation still has to come there. So we'll wait to see when that shoe drops.
Don't want to make light of serious issues, but the Gaza thing, it does sort of the range of options there, right? That Trump is promoting, it sort of cracks me up. But one is Trump Tower over Gaza. The other is the meme, hear me out, Gaza with no Gazans, right? And it's somewhere in between there, very, very, very interesting stuff. But we have to move forward because I really want to get your take on a very important issue that we're going to be talking a lot more about. And it's part and parcel with with really passing the CR. I mean, there's a big debate among Republicans about budgets and so forth, and CRs are the devil, and we know that they are. And in fact, you and I oppose these. We want to see Congress actually pass budgets. But this time, the argument is we got to keep things going a little bit so that we can do all the things we need to do, right? And part of this argument, implicitly at this point, and sometimes explicitly, is impoundment. The concept of impoundment, something that something that OMB under Russ Vought will, I think, is very interested in. Something that the administration is already preparing the American people for. And you had a post on X today about what's going on with this issue. So if you could explain that to our audience, what is impoundment and what is going on?
Okay, so this is a very old debate. The impoundment debate, Matt, as a scholar yourself, this goes back all the way to the origins of the American founding. Thomas Jefferson actually was the first president of the United States who ever impounded federal funds. I believe the year was 1801, if I'm not mistaken there. So impoundment refers to the presidential practice of taking funding that Congress has already statutorily authorized and then using your own Article 2 presidential discretion to choose whether to actually allocate that funding or not. And there was a grand kind of separation of powers constitutional question there as to whether this practice, broadly speaking, is legal. Is this is it consistent with the president's ability to, quote, take care that the laws be faithfully executed, the take care clause of Article 2? Congress, we know, has the power of the purse under Article 1, Section 8. So it's a genuinely interesting separation of powers constitutional question that's been disputed for a very long time. The court has actually never definitively weighed in one way or the other. Back in the early 1970s, Richard Nixon was seen by some as abusing this power. Congress, in response, passed the Impoundment Control Act of 1974, which broadly limits the president's ability to do this. And that's essentially been the law for the past half century. But again, SCOTUS has never actually ruled one way or the other there. But you're totally right. Russ Vought, in that early OMB memo, was essentially asserting this Jeffersonian notion of presidential impoundment there. Frankly, this whole dispute currently happening in Amir Ali's courtroom in Washington, D.C. when it comes to the $2 billion in USAID funding. That was the case last week where Amy Coney Barrett and John Roberts went wildly on the temporary restraining order. This all has to do with the issue of impoundment there. So, I mean, the post that I put up on social media basically said, look, I mean, I'm a constitutional law guy. This, like birthright citizenship for children of illegal aliens, these are open questions. I mean, SCOTUS has actually never ruled one way or the other on these questions there. Is the court perfect right now? No, it's very far from perfect. Frankly, I wish that we had 9 Clarence Thomases and Sam Alitos. We don't. We have some squishy center-right jurists like John Roberts, Amy Coney Barrett, and Brett Kavanaugh's squishier than most, frankly. But, it's still, broadly speaking, Matt, realistically, probably about as good a court as we're going to get, at least for now, pending positive elements that I don't necessarily see happening there. So I say let's shoot our shot. Let's take this chance now. If you're the Trump DOJ, let's try to tee up directly these constitutional questions that we have not gotten a definitive answer on, whether it's birthright citizenship, whether it's impoundment of presidential funds, whether it's the all-important question that we've discussed before of nationwide injunctions. That's probably the number one most important thing there. But there's no shortage of critical constitutional questions that if I were working in the Trump DOJ Solicitor General's office right now, I would be working on those cert petitions. Burn the midnight oil, guys. Get these cert petitions filed.
Excellent. Well, yeah, we'll be talking about this a lot more, and we'll see how it pans out. I mean, it's definitely it's going to be in the courts in many ways, I think, for a while, because the administration is very committed to using it. So, coming soon to a theater near you. But before we leave you, Josh, we have to talk about the Jews. We got to talk about the Jews, as opposed to perhaps many of the sorts of things you hear, sadly these days online and these debates and discourse such that it is. You have a book coming out March 18th called "Israel and Civilization: The Fate of the Jewish Nation and the Destiny of the West." So, what can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so the book comes out this Tuesday. It's my first book, so I'm very excited about this. So the book, Matt, it sounds like a very Jewy book, and it is to an extent, but it's so much broader than that, actually. So we deliberately chose the cover of this book, Moses parting the Red Sea, not some kind of blue and white iconography or something like that there, because the book is fundamentally calling for a biblical restoration. That actually really is the book, Matt. I basically argue that all that what we call Western civilization today actually begins with God's revelation to Moses and the Israelites at Mount Sinai. I kind of trace the history of the English common law, the American founding there, how so much of this was predicated upon biblical ideals. And the book ultimately calls not just for close U.S.-Israel relations, which is in there, but really more broadly speaking, calling for an ecumenical, Jewish, Christian, biblical, nationalist alliance, which alone is capable of withstanding and turning back the tide against the three hegemonic forces that seek to subjugate us, which are wokeism, Islamism, and global neoliberalism. So there's a lot packed in there, but I would like to think that the book kind of walks through all these thematically there. So again, Israel and Civilization, the Fate of the Jewish Nation, and the Destiny of the West. You can pre-order it now. It's out this Tuesday.
Yes, March 18th. And where is your preferred method that people buy this book?
Amazon and Barnes & Noble are probably the two most popular online vendors, but whatever works for you, it's available online in a bunch of places.
Josh, thanks so much. It looks great.
My pleasure. Thank you guys so much.
All right. Well, don't go anywhere because is Elon Musk going after Social Security? Chris Bedford will separate fact from fiction just ahead. Doge has been making headlines for slashing government waste, and former government-funded outlets like the AP are reporting that Musk may be setting his sights on Social Security and government benefits. Here's a clip of him addressing those two agencies.
I mean, the waste report in entitlement spending, which is which is most of the federal spending is entitlements. That's like the big one to eliminate. Because that's the sort of $500 billion, maybe $700 billion a year.
Well, here to break this all down for us is Blaze Media senior editor for politics, Chris Bedford. So Bedford, I mean, this is a classic instance of you don't hate the media enough, right? When you look at what the AP is trying to say actually happened versus what we could hear Elon Musk say out of his mouth. We all know what he's talking about.
I mean, if you go back to the 1960s presidential campaigns, you can see the Democrats saying that Republicans are trying to cut your benefits, cut Social Security, cut Medicare. This is an ancient Democratic trope. And the reason why you still hear it 60 years after Barry Goldwater ran for office is because it's so successful, because Americans feel like they're really owed this. Of course, no one really wants to talk about how badly it's managed, how much fraud goes on in these programs, but more how they actually they don't have to be broke. They don't have to be lost leaders for the government. Other countries have figured out ways to, at the same time, guarantee you get that money, but also make sure that money makes profit and that you get more of it, especially on years where the stock market is doing well. Because remember, we're not talking about a one-year investment. We're talking about a 50-year investment. It's completely different in every level. But if they can get onto anything, they're going to get onto that. And Donald Trump has been different. He's kind of actually like Ronald Reagan a little bit in this way, the way that Reagan ran for president, not the Reagan of early radio shows, and that he's very explicit. He's not going to mess with these sorts of programs that have often been something that conservatives and libertarians have come for. And in that interview, he's really clear. He's going to go after waste. He's going to go after fraud. He's going to go after abuse. When you have programs that are as big as America's Social Security programs, you're going to get that. In fact, I mean, I personally have known people in my life who have committed these sorts of fraud. During COVID, some people got very wealthy doing these sorts of things. And if they want to make this a talking point, sure. But we have a few years left until an election, and they're going to have to come up with more concrete examples than Elon Musk talking.
Okay, and let that be. But isn't there actually potentially honestly, a rift here, or at least a disagreement behind the scenes on the right? And you have some people who, look, they've been yakking about the entitlement problem for a long time. Much so that I think a lot of us. I mean, I used to hear it's like 5 years, 10 years, whole thing's done. It's a Ponzi scheme, right? Which at some level, I believe, like a lot of early Gen Xers and younger, right? I mean, I don't think I'm going to get anything, and I don't count anything from the government. I'm not dependent on it. But we've been hearing this for a long time, and it certainly is part and parcel of sort of the old mainstream right. And then on the other hand, you have a sort of populist Donald Trump, as you said. It says, look, like Reagan, I'm not dealing with that now. We have plenty of other fish to fry.
Yeah, there's disagreements, just like there was disagreements in the 80s. I mean, I talked to an old Senate hand who spent a lot of the time negotiating back when senators had really serious staffs who would often negotiate on their behalf before Google, when this was a serious profession for a lot of folks. And he told a story about a budget deal that they were working on, and a Republican came in really excited and said, I got the Democrats to agree to 2% in domestic spending cuts for every 1% in defense cuts. And the White House said, what the heck are you talking about? The Reagan administration didn't come here to cut white domestic spending. They came here to win the Cold War. That is the prerogative. You go back in there and tell them that deal's off the table. And there are some Republicans who felt that way. Ron Paul was in the Congress at the time. And there are Republicans today who feel a certain way about this, and they've spent their entire lives with a real focus as fiscal hawks on different things. And right now, people like Elon Musk are keeping them happy. I mean, you're seeing members of the Freedom Caucus come out and people who've never voted for a CR in their lives backing the president's agenda on this because they like where the government is going and they think that they'll get a deal down the road. But Donald Trump's number one issue is not fixing the deficit. He wants to cut spending. He wants to limit the government. Elon Musk is helping him do that, but it's not his number one goal. His number one goal is bringing back the control of the deep state to actually the American people's elected leader, fighting the culture war, pushing back against the incredible excesses of the left, and dismantling their global operation. And unfortunately, just like many times, basically every time in Republican history, the fiscal hawks have had to take a backseat to that.
Well, Politico has a random act of journalism that they have committed today. USAID orders immediate destruction of sensitive documents as the agency collapses. That's the headline. And Chris, it says the acting director, Erica Carr, has issued the remaining staff on Tuesday to shred and burn all the classified safe documents and personnel records there in Washington, D.C. They said shred as many documents as first, reserve the burn bags for when the shredder becomes unavailable or needs a break. Now, I'm not a legal expert, but I don't think this is how you're supposed to be doing things right now.
No, that is not how you're supposed to handle transition. Records are legally required, any kind of federal records are legally required, executive records, to be preserved for the incoming administration. And I'm not a legal expert. I'd have to talk to some folks on this, but my understanding is that if you're issuing orders like that, then you're putting yourself in grave legal jeopardy. And it makes me wonder who are they working with? What are they trying to cover up? And it also, if you're putting things in text and email like that, it makes me think that you're probably not as bright as you think you are. And that an actual real investigator or forensic investigator will be able to find a lot of these documents. And then you've got the worst of both worlds for the cover. You got the cover up, and then you've got the original documents themselves.
Well, your lips to God's ears on that one. I'd like to see lots of action when it comes to this sort of stuff actually being taken. But let's move on to another division on the right that I've been kind of itching to talk about with all of us. And that's Thomas Massie, the case of Massie, or as Jill is saying, Sassy Massie. So here we have someone that a lot of people respect for good reason. He's a little out there. He's he's a character, and a lot of people on the right like him. And he got in the way of Donald Trump, and Donald Trump basically, punched him in the face in that now infamous post. And you have a certain bit of argument going on about this. What do you think's going on?
Well, I mean, Thomas Massie is someone you can count on to be like this. You just roll your eyes. I'm not sure exactly why people like that really stay in Congress. It's got to be very frustrating to be a lone voice of dissent all the time and not get a lot of your ideas really realized. But he's not a bad man. He's a good man. He's on the Deese show earlier today. I compared him to Dr. Manhattan, that when he sadly lost his wife in the last year, he kind of lost a lot of the things that calmed him down, the things that tethered him to really caring about this DC swamp or anything else that tamed him is now gone. And we all knew he was going to vote like this, which is why I don't really see the point in Donald Trump attacking him. But Donald Trump's it's really clear that when you cross him, small or big, he's generally going to lash out. You can still repair bridges, which I would strongly recommend the congressman do if he wants to run for governor of Kentucky, where he can actually make a difference. But he's also for how much I love him. And like, if you want to understand what a cool guy he is, and you kind of understand what an eccentric person he is, you can go back and find an old television show where he built a battle bot, him and a bunch of other MIT nerds, to fight other robots. And Thomas Massie is one of the extremely nerdy engineers working on this. And you get a glimpse inside this guy's brain. He's not a normal, just I'm going to bargain with this engineer, a politician. He's an engineer, and he looks at these things more mechanically. And sometimes he looks at human relationships a little bit that way in politics. He's not just going to shake hands, let bygones be bygones. But at the same time, this is a part where the rubber is really meeting the road, to use a cliche here. For a lot of Republicans who are very comfortable in the opposition, very comfortable voting no, very comfortable saying I stand alone against this, there are realities to governing and actually governing responsibly and having an agenda, an administration that is the most revolutionary administration in decades from the right. We've seen a couple from the left. And you need to, if you want to actually win this war ever, you can't always be doctrinal. You need to actually sometimes disagree on, vote for things that you disagree on. And fortunately, I think you are seeing that from more Republicans than not.
Chris Bedford, we so appreciate your time each and every day. Thanks so much.
What do you think of this new studio I'm in?
I think it has moody vibes, Bedford. I don't know what kind of moody vibes it is, but the fact that it's blue in DC doesn't make me have really good thoughts about it.
It reminds me of an Indian.
I love CPI.
Reminds me of an Indian guy I used to know.
But we just can't go with the blue next time, okay? Let them know. Red lights, I don't know.
Red lights is a different thing in DC.
Put on a red light, Chris.
Yeah,
Put on a red light.
As soon as it got out of my mouth, I was like, you know what? Maybe we should just end this segment. Bedford, thanks so much. MP, when you look at it, I mean, sassy with Massie, it's a whole thing. And Bedford was breaking down. He's not a normal guy. He's an outsider. He's an MIT guy.
Yeah, this is where I think, the way Chris said it in the beginning, maybe we disagree, maybe we don't. Massie does like this. We know why he does this. He lives for this. He's the kind of guy who builds his own, machines inside his house, his own kind of well, his own. This is a guy who's very smart. My grandfather was an engineer. He built his own speakers, and he lives for the moment to be the stick in the mud where he's like, oh no, I'm not going to go along with this. I'm going to stay principled. And there's always a couple of these guys in Congress. And the problem with him is, as he said, the political virtue is prudence, to know what the right thing to do at the right time is for the right reasons. And in this case, that one of these guys is not going to do it. And it doesn't surprise me that it's Massie because, as he says, he doesn't care at all what people think. He's the opposite of most people in Congress. He likes to piss you off, right? And I get it. But
he didn't just build a battle bot. I remember looking at his feed on X, and he has a chicken coop, and he would make it go around his lawn in different places, like it was on a timer, so that he's like, oh, I don't even have to do anything. It's automatic. The machine is going to do it itself.
Yeah, you watch the interview with Tucker Carlson and him is very good, and he describes building all kinds of wells, plumbing. He's into all that stuff, and that's why he's so great most of the time. But look, he lives for these moments. To be weird. And I think to Chris's point, there are times when you say, look, this is not a joke. We really, there's a real argument to do this, and it's close. But these are the characters that you kind of love and hate at the same time.
Well, you've heard our take. When we come back, should Thomas Massie actually be primaried? We'll have your answers after this. Well, the good news is X wanted to play along nicely with us today, so we are back trying to get what you think in the show. So today, I went on X and asked if you support Donald Trump trying to primary Thomas Massie, and 16% said yes, MAGA, but sassy with Massie, no. The big leader at 74%, 9.7% MP said that they were unsure, but sassy with Massie. This is where the people are.
So I think you skewed the poll by putting the sassy in there. It makes it very appealing.
Massie does it, though. But also MAGA was the other one. And MAGA is, I don't know if you know this or not, pretty popular. Pretty popular.
Look, I like, yes, MAGA, but I think I like saying MAGA as much as possible generally in my life. I think that a lot of people feel a little bad for Massie, but on the other hand, I understand why Trump did this, because if you let people do this, they'll keep doing it, and you'll get more weirdos doing this, And so he wanted to smack him around a little bit, which I understand. What I hope is he just doesn't actually do much about it in the future.
I will say today was basically Thomas Massie Day on X. Everybody was out there posting about him. Let's go ahead and get to some of your comments. We'll start with David. He said, Trump is throwing comments to see what sticks. I don't think that he really wants Massie primaried, but he does want to encourage support. And Trump played a tough and sometimes nasty game. Not that I like it, but that's how he rolls. And he has a good batting average.
Yeah, I mean, David basically agrees with what I just said. It's like, hey, slap him around a little bit verbally and then, walk away. You made your point. I kind of feel like that's what Trump is doing here. But he's got to say something because he needs everyone to get in line.
Stochastic Sarcastic replied, saying, why won't Trump go after rhinos? I know, I got that right. Of which there are plenty to choose from. There are plenty of rhinos, right? We talk about them on this show, and we would love to see Trump go after the rhinos, use the kingmaker status to actually go after the rhinos that need you to go after them in their primaries. Yeah,
I mean, Stochastic Sarcastic has a point. You go after the rhinos.
You just wanted to say it too.
I was just practicing. I'm just following your lead. I'm trying to be as good as you. I learned it from watching you, Jill.
You can use it in a sentence. It's okay.
Yes. So, stochastically varied. Anyway, look, you go after rhinos, but he does go after rhinos. The problem is, what's a rhino? In Trump's mind, I'll tell you what he's thinking. This person stands in my path, and he needs to get out of my path because we got to pass this CR. And it's a close run thing, and we can deal with everything else later, right? That's all Trump is thinking. So there you go.
Country Yank rounds out all of the replies today, saying, this is a distraction. Epstein files now. I will say, if there is one thing that we have learned about this audience, is that they want the Epstein files, and they want them now. They don't care. This is all distraction. Please stop. Move on to the real topics.
I don't want to be the party pooper here, but I'm going to be on this one. You live in Chinatown. You live in the 1970s, the movie. You live in 1930s Chicago, and you have for a long time. So you're going to be really lucky to see any of these files because the files are random bits of evidence that were collected by corrupt agencies first. And some of those agencies, probably more than one, are other countries. So when you say Epstein files, like who owns the Epstein file? Guess what, kids? I mean, there's a couple countries out there who were creating the files for the sake of international blackmail and including our own agencies. So, look, I'm all about it, too. I think it's really important. I think everyone out there is right to say it's important. But let's not kid ourselves about what's going on here.
Yeah. I mean, everybody kind of looks back now and says Pam Bondi, maybe she shouldn't have made all those claims. I think Anna Paulina Luna, being the head of the task force for all of the files that are supposed to come out with JFK and MLK and the like, she was very excited too. Like, oh, we're going to go do all these things. Now I'm wondering, maybe they would say, let's back off of that for a little while until we know the things are actually going to happen.
So I think that the oldest game in the book that bureaucrats play is the fake release. I mean, so you say, I'm going to give you something, but I give you something that's not the full deal. This is a very wise tactic. A lot of people use it. I think probably everyone uses it in their daily life. You don't say the whole thing. You keep some of it back, and then the person's satisfied. I mean, we do that with kids all the time, right? You're not going to tell them everything when they ask some of these questions, but you give them a little bit, and they think like they know it, but that's not the whole truth. That's what's going on here in many cases, right, in the past. So I think everyone out there is sick of that. We want to see the real thing now. We want to really get to the bottom of this stuff, and we have to keep pushing. We'll keep pushing, and you keep pushing, and we'll do it together.
Maybe later. That's always the answer, right? Every time you want something, you know what? Maybe we'll do it later. But take us home with your lesson for the day, Professor Peterson.
It's not so much a lesson as an exhortation. My stochastic remarks at the end of every show. Look, I want to talk about something that's important these days because I think there's still people holding on to the past. And maybe even in my mind or, everyone's mind out there in some way, we're holding on to old modes and orders, old ways of doing things, the way old institutions worked. And at its best, civilization creates certain habits, right? You do things a certain way. People who are, on TV look like this. People who are actors look like this. People who are journalists look like this. And this is what they do, and this is how they get credentialed. Well, all that's fading, right? And so there's a virtue to having those credentials. I was on the phone with a journalist the other day talking about journalism, which, as an ism, I don't really believe in the way that the mainstream press has for the last few decades. Here's the thing. In this new environment, you don't have to worry about that stuff anymore. And when those old frameworks like fall apart, right? When the old ways of doing politics fall apart, all of a sudden a new rule emerges amidst the chaos. And it's this: don't be boring. Don't be boring. That means don't follow the same paths, right? Don't live within the same boxes that don't actually exist around you anymore. Either in your daily life, the way you think about, how you should go about the life, the way you think about how you should achieve your goals, you can't trust those old frameworks anymore. And so a rule of thumb, because most people get uncomfortable, right, when in these situations, a rule of thumb is, I'm giving you permission, don't be boring. If you're not boring, you're guaranteed to be pushing the envelope in some way and challenging yourself. And this is the way politics is right now. This is the way everything is moving. It's like Uncle Elon says, and he's absolutely right about it, the most entertaining option is the most likely at this point. That's true. And it can be the same way in your own life. But don't be boring, and don't be afraid, to not be boring. I say this with all seriousness. I think it's a very serious point, both when it comes to media, both when it comes to creating things, and also when it comes to living our own lives.
I look at you going around the old frameworks and the isms and everything, and I think this is Sassy with Massie all over again. He's not boring. He's not following any frameworks. He's going through and paving his own path in life.
And that is why people like him. That's why people are saying, you know what? Trump, don't hit him too hard. We like Massie. Why? Because he's a character. Because he doesn't care what other people think of him, and he's never boring.
He always has something different and unique to say, and that is important because now I feel like people's personalities, they just want to fit in, right? It's like so much of social media is basically just trying to program you to fit in. It's something that you have to go against the grain and make sure that you're not part of the herd anymore.
No, I can get back to herd, but it is true, I guess we should say, that Massie can be boring sometimes.
Well, he can be.
Nerdy topics.
Nerdy topics.
It is actually true, but as a character, as a human being, the man is fascinating. He's fascinating. And if you haven't heard some longer interviews with him, that Tucker Carlson one, Not Our Network, I Don't Care, you should go watch it because he's very, very good. He's very good at politicians in that because he says they all want to be liked just like actors and actresses, and he's 110% correct. That's the one thing you need to know about him. And Massie gets that because he doesn't care. He doesn't want to be liked. He doesn't want to go along with the herd, right? And the herd is a real thing. You can't fake. You can't just not be part of the herd, right? Like a teenager, just like, I just won't do whatever and just be rebellious. And that's why I say don't be boring. It's a better heuristic because don't be boring is like, you have to do something interesting, right? It has to be positive. But you do not want to be riding with the herd right now because they are riding off a cliff. Everything legacy, everything old, all those credentials, they're riding off a cliff. You don't have to hide anymore. You don't have to hide anymore.
The best friends at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue are certainly not boring with Donald Trump and Elon Musk. Donald Trump getting in and buying his own Tesla today. He's making sure that things are going well and that there's never a boring day thus far in his second term here as president of the United States. And we here at Blaze News, The Mandate, appreciate that more than you know, President Trump. Thanks for keeping every day entertaining. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you back here tomorrow night.